Hello everyone, Grimm here, and tonight, or today, we are going to go through some true ghost encounters. This is from the subreddit r/ghost stories. Tonight we will not be having a special guest. It'll just be myself and I will be the first and last narrator for today. So if you like today's video, please remember to like and subscribe. And the usual, sit back, relax, and, well, enjoy. My grandma's house has always, for as long as I can remember, been a scary place. My dad and aunt and uncle all grew up in the house and had paranormal experiences occur throughout their lives. One example was when my dad and uncle were teenagers. My uncle was walking down the steps and swinging a towel, as he had just washed his hair. Out of nowhere, my dad, who was standing in the living room at the bottom of the stairs, saw the towel straighten up in front of my uncle, as if someone pulled it, and my uncle fell forcefully down the stairs. Now, my grandmother hates all things paranormal, especially Ouija boards, and she would often visit gypsies. So it's just a big no-no in our family to discuss the paranormal events that occur in her house. 20 years or so ago, my cousins and brothers were playing in the upstairs bedrooms of our grandparents' house. The toys were all set up in the room across the hall from them, and they were all in the same bedroom playing board games. Out of nowhere, a Hot Wheels car, no battery, no wind-up, just an average Hot Wheels car, slowly exited the room that the toys were in. It went across the hall and into the room where they were all sitting. Needless to say, they were all terrified. Around 8 years ago, my oldest brother moved into the basement of their house. One night, when he was home alone, he woke up out of a deep sleep, having felt like he was shaken by someone. He stood up and instantly smelt gas. He went upstairs and outside of the house. Later, he found out there was a carbon monoxide leak, and if he had not been woken up, there was a big chance he could have died in his sleep. Months after that, when my grandparents were away for the weekend, the family decided to try the Ghost Radar app in their house. We all sat around the phone, and my uncle asked, normal questions. Is there anyone here? Blah blah. Then he asked who used to live in this basement. At this point, my brother had moved out. The Ghost Radar replied with my brother's full first name, which none of us ever called him. We were shocked, so my uncle asked, how did you save my brother? It replied with, wake. He then asked, what did you save him from? And it said, gas. Needless to say, we were shocked. The last thing that I'm going to talk about that happens in this house is my grandparents' friends' obituaries will show up in their kitchen every month or so. They usually say hello to their friends and put the obituary back in the basement where it's supposed to stay. A little while later, it'll show back up in the kitchen. How do you pass through a graveyard safely at night? I think I have found a solution. Last night I was out drinking and I followed a friend home because he got a bit too drunk. On my way back I decided to walk through the graveyard. I thought it might look nice. It did not. I felt fear brewing, but then I got an idea of how to get safe passage. Alcohol has always been a large part of Denmark's culture. I had a nearly full beer in my hand. My drunk and scared ass had found a new way to stay safe. I started saying cheers to the gravestones as I walked through the graveyard. Nothing happened, but when all the beer was gone, so was my fear. I wonder, did I find a loophole? In Danish culture, it's very rude not to cheer back when someone says cheers. The way I see it is, if I'm busy cheering the ghost, then they were probably busy saying it back. Hence, they were unable to find a chance to mess with me. This situation made me stop working night shifts. I work as a PSW on night shift at a long-term care home. I had a resident bell ring at 2:59 a.m. I went in and asked her what she needed, and she proceeded to yell that there was a man in her bathroom and I needed to get him out. We had people who would wander around and go into other rooms. So I asked her what the man looked like, and she said that he was a black figure and had no face. I calmed her down and then told whoever was in the bathroom that they had to leave her alone. I then went back to my charting. Around 3:10 I had another call bell ring from the other side of the floor from where the first bell went off. I went into this resident's room. This particular resident would ask for pain medicines around this time, and I asked if they needed their meds. He told me, and I quote, "There's a creepy man in my room with no face. You need to get him out." My blood ran cold, and I had a nurse stay with me on the floor for the rest of my shift. I have more stories if anybody is interested in hearing them. I think my nurse was a ghost. In 2020, at the beginning of COVID, I had just given birth. At this time, I could only have one other person in the room with me my entire stay at the hospital. Of course, my kid's father was there, but like the third day, he left and went to clean up our house and get things ready and prepared for me and baby. I had gotten sick and had a C-section, so I had to stay for about 4 to 5 days. Well, while he was away, a nurse named Kelly said she would be helping me through the day and spending time with me so I didn't feel lonely while the dad was gone. I couldn't really hold my baby due to me being sick and the pain from the C-section, so my nurse would come in every time it was time to feed. I noticed when they came they wouldn't acknowledge Kelly, and she would go to the furthest part of the room, and she would tell me that she's just going to get out of the way. Now, she did tell me that she didn't specialize in what they did, so she was just there to comfort me. At the time, I didn't question anything. The entire day, she was so helpful and encouraging to me, I really believed I would have broken down if she wasn't there for me. She was such a sweetheart. Well, after about 5 or 6 hours, she told me she had to leave and that she would come visit me again before her shift was over to see how I was doing. She hugged me, blew a kiss to the baby, and walked out of the room. Later that night, Dad came back and he was very upset. He had told me some stuff happened with his mum and that he was sorry he took so long. I was upset, but I told him that a nurse named Kelly kept me company. As I'm telling him about her, my nurse is changing my sheets and she's like, "Who's Kelly?" I explained and she said that nobody named Kelly was in my room or working that day. So I instantly thought about those women who would pretend to be nurses to kidnap children, but my nurse told me that I may be hallucinating, and she told my doctor. I talked to my doctor, and he said the same thing. Well, a couple of hours later, A nurse that I didn't recognize came into my room and said, "I know this might sound crazy, but everyone on this floor is talking about you seeing Kelly." I said, "Yeah. She was here with me for like 7 hours today. She helped out a lot." We're smiling and laughing while I was telling her about Kelly and how sweet and funny she was. Then she pulled up her phone and showed me pictures of her and Kelly that looked like it had to have been maybe taken in the early 2000s. I was smiling, knowing that I wasn't hallucinating. Then she sat down and told me Kelly had died over 10 years ago from a domestic violence incident with her boyfriend. I wasn't too shocked because my entire life I'd been dealing with the paranormal, but I still got chills because I never had an encounter this deep. Well, the lady gave me a hug and started crying, saying now I know that she's okay. Since that day, I've been wondering why did Kelly come into my room and help me. I kinda wish I could see her again. This is a terrifying encounter that happened to me while I was in Iraq. I was sergeant in the U.S. Army and ETSing from the military when President Bush ordered more troops into Iraq in 2003. I had just returned home to Texas when I was summoned to my local National Guard unit at Camp Marbury and told that I was being recalled to the Army. But the unit was already tasked out to deploy to Iraq. I was not part of their unit yet, so the commander offered to give me a waiver to deploy with a government contractor, Burton in Houston. I knew that I would make more money as a contractor, so I took the offer. Not long after arriving at Kuwait at Camp Doha, I began working with the operations team overseeing logistic affairs. We would oversee the daily convoy supply between Kuwait and Baghdad, a route riddled with IED incidents, small arms skirmishes, and almost constant breakdowns of army and civilian vehicles. Because I was a sword gunner in the 1st Infantry Division while in active duty, and was technically still in the Guard, I was often in the convoys managing mountain weapons that accompanied the mostly civilian convoys. During these runs, we would often have a few strange encounters in the area south of Baghdad, known then as Camp Babylon, occupied by French troops, but then designated an archaeological site for obvious reasons. Camp Babylon was set up in the area that was said to have originally been inhabited by the famous Tower of Babel. Indeed, there were ruins there that did look a lot like a massive structure once stood at that spot. I had 2 strange incidents that happened to me while passing through there. The first incident seems a bit benign, but it sets the mood for the second. We were passing through Camp Babylon in the afternoon one day when our convoy took small arms fire. The SOP at the time, standard operating procedure, was to stop the convoy and return fire. This was because, in the past, such incidents ended up being a lone gunman attempting to scare the convoy into running into IEDs on the road. Because of this, the SOP changed to stop the convoys, dismount, and return fire. While engineers looked for explosive devices on the road, we scanned the horizon for enemies. There was nothing. They most likely fled immediately. However, the ruins around the Camp Babylon were alive with shadow figures that seemed to move about the area. Several times we would spot the figures, but they would immediately disappear. A contractor, lying beside me with his weapon, commented, "How odd is that we are in the shadow of Babylon and fighting with the supernatural." I didn't respond, but I knew he was a 32nd degree Mason who was really into the arcane aspects of Babylon, etc. I didn't feel at the time that much was supernatural, but certainly did see the shadowy and bizarrely small figures dart about the structures. Once the road was deemed clear, we continued on to Baghdad. The second incident to occur had happened about a month later. At this point, the weather in the southern Iraq and Kuwait had turned quite cold at night. During this encounter, we had completed the supply run in Baghdad and were returning back to camp of Duha in Kuwait when the vehicle in our convoy broke down. Once again, we found ourselves right in Camp Babylon. While the army mechanics took a look at the vehicle and the rest of us took up fighting positions around the area, strange things began to occur. It started with a strange light bobbing in the desert. Thinking it was a person with a flashlight, we used NVGs, night vision goggles, to watch. It was simply a glowing ball of light moving towards a set of ruins. After initial contact with the light, a few of us had moved further away from the convoy to see what the source was. After seeing it was a self-contained entity and not a person, we were a bit alarmed. Then we heard a sound that we will never forget. A long wailing began from one of the ruined structures in its foundations not far away. It sounded like a woman in agony mixed with loneliness. On and on the sound went while we huddled in the cold and dark, wondering what the hell we were listening to. With our NVGs equipped, we used our flashlights to spotlight the ruins. If you've ever done this, you will know that a normal flashlight with NVG looks like a massive beam of light. We scoured the area, but no source of the wails or the ball of light were seen. About this time, we were told via radio that the vehicle was repaired and ready to roll, so we decided to return to the convoy. I was sailing my saw over my shoulder when I noticed my contractor partner was staring at the ruins in horror. He was frozen. I shook him and he snapped out of his stupor, quickly leaving the area with the rest of us. Once we were back at camp and it was pleasantly daylight in the following morning, several of us were chatting about the encounters at Camp Babylon before our daily operation briefing. It was then that I remembered the terrified expression on the face of the contractor, so I asked him about it. He was still obviously traumatized by the event, but managed to explain that as we were leaving our possession on the sandy hill, he saw a tall black figure standing beside the ruins. It was watching us as we were looking for it. He said that he felt an instant wave of despair hit him and thought that he was gonna die. He didn't remember leaving the area. His next memory was being in the Humvee heading back to Kuwait. I'm now writing non-fiction books about haunted places for the publishers that I have and have visited hundreds of reputedly haunted spots, but I'll never forget the wailing figure at the ruins of Babel. It's also worth noting that when I relate this story, sometimes our Pakistani employees at Camp Dawei and the camp of Afghan, they are just quiet and horrified. One of them, a translator we called Artie, said that we had encountered a djinn or a damned spirit, and that we were lucky to be able to tell the tale. And to this, I agree. This is a short story, but it is true. When I was about 15, my grandmother died. We were really close, and I took her death pretty hard. She had died on the toilet, and to make light of the situation, I would joke that she went out like Elvis. Well, a few days after she died, I was on the toilet when the bathroom light turned off. Not a burned bulb. Something physically flipped the switch. And as I sat there, I saw a faint blue light look as though it shot out the window. I was kind of spooked, but welcomed all paranormal activity. When I walked out of the bathroom, my 5-year-old sister looked at me and said, "Grandma was just at the end of the bed. She told me to tell you she said hi and she is sorry for turning off the lights." I will never forget that moment. In fact, it's one of my favorite memories. I had a conversation with my brother for 2 days before I found out that he had died the week before. This is the first time I'm actually writing about this. So, when I was 13, my older brother, 18, and I were on our way to the movie when we were hit by a drunk driver. I woke up in hospital 4 days later, having lost my right leg and the other leg in a cast along with other injuries. That night I woke up to my brother sitting by my bed telling me everything will be okay and to go back to sleep. The next day, parents came to visit and see how I was doing. I asked why my brother wasn't with them, and they looked at each other, but they didn't say anything. That night, I again woke up to my brother sitting by my bed again telling me he knows I can get through this and that I need to be strong and overcome this and not let my injury stop me from living my life. We talked a bit, him not answering specific questions but answering more generic or general questions. I remember asking him why he was still wearing clothes from yesterday because that was very unlike him to wear anything similar to what he'd wore the day before. He didn't answer. But when I asked him how he was, he said better than he thought he would be given the circumstances. He reminded me to be strong and keep living and not let anything stop me, and how much he loved me before telling me I should get some more sleep. That next day, my parents once again came to visit me at the hospital, and I again asked them why my brother wasn't with them, and they again looked at each other, and it was only after I said that I would like my family to visit together and not at different times, and I would like my brother to visit during the day when I can talk more. Instead of at night, my dad asked what I meant, and I told him that my brother had been coming to me every night to visit. My mum broke down and left the room. My dad then told me that it was impossible because Andy died in the accident instantly. I didn't believe it, and I argued it and ended up having to be sedated. That night I had no visit. The next day, my parents brought the newspaper article about the accident. Years later, my fiancée had an experience, and having never seen a photo of my brother, she described him to a T and what he was wearing. That is a story for another time, but it was nice knowing that my brother is still around and looking out for me and those I love. Here is my fiancé's experience, a continuation from the previous story. Since people asked on my last post, I got permission from my fiancé to share this. Something to note before getting into what happened. My brother died when I was 13 and we were both in a car accident. My fiancé never met my brother, never even seen a photo of him before this. My fiancé is bipolar, extreme highs and extreme lows. We had been dating for 4 months at the time and had just moved in together. I didn't know at the time, but she had gone off her meds. This happened while I was at work, and she told me about it later. She went out for a walk to get some air because she was feeling really claustrophobic, the start of a manic/depressive episode. It got to the point that she thought dying would be the best option, and standing at the corner she thought the best idea would be to just walk into traffic. As she took a step off the curb, someone grabbed her and pulled her back and turned her around into a hug. Arms wrapped around her, telling her she doesn't truly want to do this, that everything will be okay, that she's stronger than she realizes, and that this isn't her time. It told her to just breathe nice and slow, deep breaths. She looked up at him and said thanks, turned around to wipe her eyes, and when she turned back, the person was gone. She told me about this when I got off work, and she wanted to put up a post online to see if she could find the guy and say a proper thank you for their help in saving her. It was when she started saying what he told her and describing him that my heart started beating faster. I knew who helped her. She described him as being 17 to 18, athletic, slightly taller than her, dark brown, shaggy hair, big freckle, birthmarks under his eyes, with a blue shirt that said J.S. Jenkins in yellow letters. It brought me back to the visits I got in hospital. The shirt my brother wore on the day of the accident, and when I saw him by my hospital bed. I told her I know who helped her, and I can't explain it. I told her it was my brother, and she said that that was impossible. It was a real person. She got mad at me for suggesting it because she never believed in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. She was very skeptic. I asked her to please trust me, and that night we drove to my parents' house, and I went into the basement and found a picture of my brother, and I asked if that was who helped her, and her face went pale and kept asking how it was possible. I had no idea what to say because I didn't know either, but I told her he came to me in my time of need, and it looks like he came to you and yours. These two things are still crazy to think about, and are definitely something that I struggle to explain. But I'm glad to know that my brother still loves us, and, as I said earlier, is willing to protect myself and those I love. Hello everyone. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. I'm not going to drag this one out, but hey, if you made it to the end, you're a true friend. And to make it even better, if it's your first time, try jumping on and clicking that subscribe button and maybe hitting the like button. Apparently, me telling you helps. This is the last time I'll do that for this video, so hey, that's a win for you. Anyway, I don't really have much more to say, but if you did get to the end, as always, let's use a random word for you to type into the comments. Would you please type in the word dino if you made it to the end? The reason I said that is I've got a dinosaur toy in front of me. Don't judge me. Dino. D-I-N-O. Alright. Well, have yourself an amazing night or day wherever you are. Be safe. And as always, I'm Grimm, and I'm, well, signing off.